Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 611 Films podcast. I am one of the two hosts, Neil McKay.
And I am the other host, David Groves. Welcome.
Welcome, welcome. We have another person in the studio. Well, not really studio, but...
in the quarantine studio.
In the quarantine studio.
And we're all in different states. Exactly.
And joining us from Oregon is...
Jonathan Meza.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Someone
hey,
else
guys.
wants to talk to you. Someone else wants to be on. Take the
yeah, you guys, everyone on this podcast gets the joy of hearing me and possibly my daughter and my son at some point throughout this thing.
Might as well.
Yep.
That's cool.
I mean, hey, we're all in quarantine together, so we
That's exactly right. This is quarantine time, guys. But yeah, I kind of dig that we're all in different states. I mean, I just thank goodness for technology.
So to give a little backstory for those that might not know, Jonathan Meza, you are my lead actor, my protagonist in Psychos and Socios. I met you a few years ago through my roommate, Johnny Vallone. You guys had worked on some things. So just to give a little backstory of you and all that stuff, let's just jump into it. Who are you, man? What do you do?
Oh,
what's your thing?
Well, I mean, it's crazy at 37 years old, all the different shifts in my life. But, being a performer and knowing that I wanted to be an actor and a performer my whole life. I mean, I've always been a performer. I mean, outside of like Broadway work, voiceover work, I do a lot of anime. So, people don't even realize they're hearing me a lot of the times. And also commercials, goodness, all the voiceover work, there's tons of it. But yeah, so on top of that, movies, TV, I was on a children's show on Nick Jr. That was my biggest claim to fame. I was on that for 4 years.
Were you on that or doing voice on that? Were you?
Oh no, that one was live. I was
okay, cool.
Yeah, the lead actor on a show called The Jumpits, Jumpitz. If anyone wants to Google it and enjoy like watching me jump around like one of the Wiggles, that's me. And
right.
And that was huge. That was 4 years of my life, and on Nick Jr. and I got to travel the world and see and perform for people everywhere. It was pretty cool. And then I worked for the Lithgows. They do live shows, so British Panto, which is like interactive theater, but like we're talking on massive scale, starring like Ariana Grande and Marina Sirtis from Star Trek. The last one we had Barry Pearl from Greece, and I mean, so they're just crazy massive shows, and I've been working with them for going on 10 years now.
Wait, so when you say the Lithgows, I think a lot of people might go, wait, John Lithgow has a thing, or is it Lithgows?
Right.
Like who? Yeah.
Nigel Lithgow. So Nigel Lithgow is the creator of American Idol, and So You Think You Could Dance. Also producer on The Muppets, American Gladiators, blah blah blah, so on and so on and so on. And his son, Chris Lithgow, has a live theater company, and the Lithgow Family Productions, and they brought British Panto, which is very famous in the UK and Australia. They brought that to the States 10 years ago, and I got in with them on their second year in the United States, and I've been hosting their shows and performing at their shows ever since.
So was that like, so it was a stage show, or is it sort of a rambling circus show? Like what kind of show is it?
No, so British Panto is huge in the UK. So it went on for hundreds of years, and how it works is during the Christmas season, very specifically, they take a show that everyone knows, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella. They take like a fairy tale and then they perform it. But all the music is like pop songs of like today's era that everyone, loves. And then they bring in all these celebrities to perform the parts. And then the show is scripted, but also improvs because the audience is interactive. So the actors have to be improvers as well as, straight actors. So you have to be able to play in the midst of all of it while keeping the script going. It's a very unique style of theater that kind of just fit my expertise perfectly. It's kind of because I've been a host for, goodness, dear Lord, 17 years, 18 years, I've been hosting events. So being a host well as an improver and an actor, it all just kind of fit with the style of theater. So if you go to the UK, like Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart are in these things, and in the UK, like it's huge, it's massive. Every family's first experience in theater is British Panto in the UK and Australia. Okay. And now it's in the States. And
so
now
that's that kind of thing, like where that's known as like, it's not just improv where we take something out of like the audience says like, hey, talk about like health insurance or cars or this. Like, but you have a script, but you also deal with the audience interacting with you. That's crazy.
Correct. Yeah, it's
Okay.
really it can be. Well, in the UK, it's much more chaotic because American audiences aren't quite attuned to how to interact with the show just yet. So my role as always the comedian in the show, because there's always two added characters, a comedian and a dame. And so my role as the comedian is to sort of like, help the audience along and sort of teach them how to interact with the show, booing the bad guys, cheering the good guys, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the UK, it can be very like bawdy and raunchy and wild. Like the adults want to have a couple drinks before you go, and the kids are loud, and it's kind of crazy. But that's how it's made to be. And
You
the
think something like
United
that
States,
would pick up here? Like,
I from the 10 years now that I've been doing it, massively. I mean, the audiences go nuts for it because they don't quite understand it at first, but once we get going, they go nuts, and we just see like, I mean, people coming back and coming back and coming back to see the shows. And once they get like a whiff of it, and we come back the next year in the same city, it's just sold out.
Yeah, right.
oh yeah.
Wait, so yeah, I remember you telling me about this. You actually did. So you did a show. It was for the holidays in December, and this was
Mhm.
in Nashville, I think. Right?
Yes,
Or
yes.
okay.
The last one I did was in Nashville, Tennessee. It was Aladdin. And then the year
Mm.
before that, I did Aladdin again in North Carolina. And then I've done Snow White like 6 times before that. And then another one called Princess and Pirates, which is a summer show they did at the Kirk Douglas Theater in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. So that was actually local for you.
Oh, every year, yeah. So the Laguna Beach gets one every year. The
Mm.
Pasadena Civic gets one every year. Um, and I've done the Pasadena Playhouse, and then the Civic now gets it instead of the Playhouse. Then they also go to Nashville, North Carolina. We've done Houston, San Diego, and a couple other cities. Oh, and North Hollywood had the first two.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, let's go backwards just a little bit because I'm kind of curious about this. You're saying like this kind of works for me because it's got a little bit of that scripted, but it's also got the improv type thing. How did you get really like started? Like you're saying performing, you did hosting and all that stuff. So I'm kind of curious, where did this all start exactly? How did acting and hosting, or just even if the Cliff Notes version, because it's so interesting.
So I I always knew I wanted to be a performer. One of those kids just sort of growing up, knowing it and doing it. And so let's see, how do I even start this? So I pushed into it as a kid, and then stopped, and then in junior high started like creating plays and sketches with my friends, and that was sort of just the beginning of it. And into high school, I had this amazing teacher named Liz O'Neill, and she sort of like started, instead of teaching us at a high school level, she taught us as professionals. And so I immediately started working professionally in high school. I was working and
Mhm.
training at a much higher
And you
level.
were here in LA, or you were
I was in San
okay.
Diego at that point.
San Diego.
Um,
Okay, gotcha.
and based on a lot of the work that I was doing with her, because she was very much into Meisner work, we were getting real deep and heavy with a lot of the acting for a high schooler. And I sort of
Yeah.
filtered a lot of my personal trauma that I went through in my life, because I'm a poor Mexican kid from LA, although no one will believe me because I look like the whitest kids you know. Um, and so
Yeah, a
I got
little.
to, what was that?
Yeah, a little.
Just
I'm
a
just saying,
little bit.
like, I mean, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mesa obviously does not really speak to, again, the Jonathan that I know, like, all off the street. I'd be like, yeah, he looks like a Jewish kid, actually. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've gotten Jewish, I've gotten Russian, and most of people just be like, "Look at that white boy," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
full-blooded Latino." Like my dad's name is
yeah,
Pedro Mesa, my mom is Maribel Jesus Goni, like
yeah.
as
There you
Latin as
go.
it comes. So I kind of kickstarted this thing off, and since I was already like studying improv and studying Meisner and studying all sorts of things in high school, I started just creating works and creating my own work immediately. And by the time I got into college, I was just sort of ahead of the game, man. And then I studied at the Moscow Art
Mm.
Theater in Russia. I got into a program there. And by the time I came back to the States, man, I was ripped and ready to go. So I dropped out of college my sophomore year. My
Where are
teachers
you going?
literally
Like,
told
where
me
were
to.
you at in college? Where did you go?
I went to UArts in Philadelphia for 1 year, and then the Moscow Art
Hmm.
Theater in Russia. And after
Okay.
Moscow, I remember sitting down with my teachers and saying like, all right, guys, what do I do now? I go back and finish college. And I remember Igor, this one teacher, saying, no, you're the actor, go act. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go start working.
Yeah, just do it.
And so I did. I came back to the States, went to San Diego, and the first audition I had, major audition, was hosting the shows at SeaWorld San Diego.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I was hosting the Shamu show, the Sea Lion and Otter show, and in those shows, they lucked out and I lucked out because the Sea Lion and Otter show is very improv-y and playful and character work. So, I was a trained dancer at that point from all this stuff in Moscow and in college and high school. So I was a trained dancer. I was trained in voice work. I studied Linklater technique, which is my speech and voice work. And so I kind of brought all these skills to SeaWorld, and an agent who was on vacation there from LA saw me perform, came up to me after the show and said, you're moving to LA and I'm going to represent you. And that was it.
Oh, okay. And what age were you at that point? You like 20, 21?
20. I was 20.
20?
Yeah, I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so he saw you doing the Shamu, the SeaWorld, and you got to be a little extra. You got to be, kind of crazy. You got to give the crowd what they want. Kind of thing.
Luckily for that one,
were you joking with them? Were you just kind of having fun with it?
So in that show, in the Sea Lion and Otter show, it's the host is very comedic and woven throughout the show, and has to sort of play a lot of characters, a lot of physical comedy, and so I was doing a lot of pratfalls, and I ended up adding a lot to it. And this agent just loved my work, and that was it. I was good to go. The Morgan Agency, that was the first agency I was with, the Morgan Agency.
Okay. Yeah. And were they gonna he was like, hey, come to LA and agencies have that notorious, hey, we really like you, but we also have 1,700 other clients, but come on our roster. But did they have an idea for you? Was it more hosting kind of thing? It was probably not acting, right?
So unfortunately, it was very commercial what they saw me doing, and we definitely didn't see eye to eye. So it only lasted over a year. They sent me only on 3 auditions, and I booked 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And they were commercials for MTV and VH1. And I got to perform with Usher and stuff, and that was some fun stuff, but they just weren't getting me out there the way that I wanted to, because I was an actor, and they just saw me as this kind of silly comedic guy, and they didn't quite get it. I remember her asking me to put little Shamu stickers on my resume, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. What's wrong with you? I was like, you're a terrible agent. And so I had this casting director that I knew in San Diego named Mickey Harrison. Mm-hmm. And they were producing a film, and she called me and was like, hey, I got this role for you. I want you to come audition. I think these guys, the directors, are going to love you. And she goes, so she called me, and I drove to San Diego without my agent knowing, and I booked a feature film, my first feature film, called Finding Love for Annie.
Mm-hmm. So low budget, like a low budget type thing?
Yeah, 50,000, I think, 50,000. Mm-hmm. This was, gosh, how many years ago? I was 21, maybe 22. And so I drove down to San Diego. I got a car accident and totaled my car on the way to the shoot.
Oh, well, that starts off well.
Right. But luckily they had rented out a house for a month of shooting, because a lot of it was going to be shot at this house. So they were like, well, you can just live here. And I was like, all right. So I lived in the house that we shot in, and I filmed my first feature film, Finding Love for Annie. It was pretty fun. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sure that was. So basically, you go and that happens. You're back in San Diego. But again, man, so let's kind of move a little forward, because not just because, but because I think you've had so many different things you've done. Every time I've talked to you, you're like, well, I was also, I dealt blackjack at a casino. Yes. I did this at a place. So, I also did this. And I'm like, holy shit, man, you've had the life that people are like, wait. And if they ever said, hey, I did this, I'm like, yeah, I know this guy, Jonathan, he probably did that too. You've done so many things. So
if I were to encapsulate my career, I feel like from a career standpoint, I'm Johnny Drama from Entourage. He always has some story about oh yeah, I did that. Oh, I worked with that person. Oh yeah. And that's my life. I have worked with freaking everyone and everything, and done everything across the board. And and I end up at the end of the day, I was kind of wondering, what the hell, what has happened to my life? What has happened? But I've got a bunch of crazy stories. like Johnny
Yeah,
Drama.
no, exactly. You definitely do, and I think it's really cool. It was always very interesting because again, I think we met. It's been obviously. I mean, Psychos. We were doing that in 17, but I knew you in 16, 15-ish maybe when you and Johnny, my roommate, who's a musician, were getting together to do kind of a comedy, sort of a Tenacious D style thing. You know,
Yeah,
that
Flight of
type
the
of thing.
Conchords, Smothers Brothers. So yeah, so I'm trained in voice work. I've done Broadway work. I was in the original production of Barbie live in Fairytopia, and which is with Mattel, and I got to travel the United States doing the national tour of that, and I did that for a year, and so yeah, I mean and so music and singing has always been part of it since I'm a big
Yeah.
goofball. Comedy has been right there with me, and Johnny and I. Oh, you have to
Oh,
excuse my
hey.
baby for a second. That's
Hey, fine.
that's the youngest. That's the youngest.
Acting. Come on, you got it.
Hold on. And so I ended up what's it called after. Well, I lost my train. Oh, Johnny. So yeah, so Johnny was actually I owned a company, an events company in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
and right. So I was working with Johnny at USC. He was an MC for my company, and he mentioned that he wrote music. He wrote music, and so I brought up the children's show that I was on, and said we're looking for a songwriter, and he pulled out his guitar and just wrote a song,
Hmm.
like right on the spot. And I called the creator of the show. Johnny played the song for him over the phone, and Johnny was offered the job just like that.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
But then, yeah, then obviously working together, with Johnny writing music years later and having fun, and then meeting you, Dave, and then, I'm in Psychos and Socios.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that was the funny thing because he was telling me about like, hey, he's not just like an MC because I think you didn't know Mulcahy, and then he was getting married in October, and then you were the MC of that whole thing. And Johnny kept saying like, no, he's not just a host, he's not just an MC about things, he's an actor. And I was like, okay, well, let's just see. So we did a little audition in our place. And I
But
was
you know
like,
what?
yeah, it's cool. That was fucking awesome. Like what he did was really good. I was playing it cool because Johnny was like, yeah, he was awesome, wasn't he? I was like, yeah, he was pretty good. In my head, I was like, yeah, he's actually really good. God damn it. But I didn't want to give Johnny that thinking of like, oh no, hold on. Like, let me play it cool as a director kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually tell people this story about me being cast in Psychos and Socios.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you say it?
because, well, so Johnny and I were writing music, and that's how, you and I, you'd come in and you'd critique
Yeah.
our songs and help us, like, and so you were like our person that we would play the music for. And then
Right.
Johnny
Yeah,
brought
that's
up
right.
like me auditioning for the film. And I
Right.
and I was like, yeah, man, I'd love to audition for your film. And I remember the first time you were like, Dave, you're great. You're like, nah, we're good. You're like, nah, we've got it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then it was when you were shooting that promotional thing for the crowdfunding, the promotional thing.
Right, right.
And
Yeah, you guys performed. You did your John. It's called the band is just John because it's
John,
Johnny and Jonathan, just John.
right? And so
Right.
you shot that promotional thing where all the people auditioning were getting killed. And
Yeah,
you
right.
were and you were like, hey, here's the script for it. And I showed up, and you were like, just here's a little script, here's some ideas. And I remember that was the day I felt like you saw me work, because then I did it, and then
Yeah.
I did it again, and then you were like, you gave me a note, and I did it again, and then I just remember saying, hey, just roll it, and I'm going to do it 3 times. And then I switched it, and I did it 3 different ways.
Right, right,
and
for sure.
and you were just like, you just looked very happy, and I was like, oh. And then you asked me after that, you're like, all right, audition. I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah, because I was
Ah.
technically not doing. Yeah, so Neil maybe he doesn't really know this because again, I didn't. It wasn't like the cattle call like back in the day. Let's go find an office space and just like have a bunch of people read for different parts. I knew Mulcahy was going to be in it. I knew Clayton Ayall were close to that area, but even them, I had them audition together. And Mulcahy was that like he was that thing that was okay, you're going to be in it somewhere somehow, but I never did that. So finding the cast of Psychos was very strange. It was just like it was a little bit of all the online, but people I knew. But then you were the one person that I was like, okay, here is like a scene from the movie. He's a jokester, but if he needs to be serious, like that was my biggest note for you. I think like the biggest note I ever gave you was don't feel afraid to ever be wildly serious 1 second, but then turn on a dime and just
Mhm.
joke with people.
Yeah. And I thank you for that, because like that's so like a lot of my career, I get so much of like the silly, funny, playful roles. Like with the Lithgows, I'm always playing like the comedian and the silly guy.
Mm,
But what they don't realize is like in all of the serious work I've done, like especially like on stage or like even in smaller films, like I'm a killer and I'm evil. Like I get to take all the trauma and horrible things that happened in my life, because I come from a horrible background, and I get to like infuse that into my work and then like twist the way that people would see me. And it's a little unnerving for like my family and friends, because they don't see that side of me, and I get to like bring it
Yeah.
out in the work. And so Psychos was wonderful because I got to sort of fuse both elements together, and it just, that was beautiful, man. It worked great.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I want to bring Neil in because, again, we're talking more. We can talk about that all day. You and I could talk about that shit all day too. But Neil and I just did a feature. 611 Films has Trip coming out. Neil directed it, wrote it. I was producer on it, and he's worked with some other actors. So I don't know if Neil has like some questions for you or
well, I was
how you
gonna
work or things like
it
that.
it kind of came up in the kind of how you guys, or how Jonathan kind of, I guess, auditioned for the role or got the role. And I find it interesting because you were saying, Dave, there's no cattle call anymore. And for when I was doing auditions for Trip, I mean, well, like everybody that was cast for that movie was basically either I saw kind of their resume or their reel like through Jamie Beebe, who's the casting director,
Yeah,
and then I
right.
just said, hey, I want them to read. Um, or it was somebody that I knew, like through somebody else or something. And I was like, ooh, I'm interested in them. Can they read, the thing? And then they send you like these self tapes and stuff. And
Mhm.
so you really don't have to do this cattle call thing anymore. I mean, you don't get that kind of director actor interaction, but it does make it a lot easier for the director, because you're just like, all right, just send me like 8 tapes and I'll review them whenever the hell I feel like it. But
Yeah,
so
right.
Jonathan, do you find that like a lot of the stuff is going that way, or are you still doing the cattle call stuff, or?
No, no, like you guys are on them. Like cattle calls are not, especially in quarantine with the world
Oh,
going.
right, of course,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
like cattle call, but all 6 feet apart, please. It's Cattle calls are not. It's not really the way anything anymore. Digital is the way everything's being done. Self
mm,
tape, digital. Even the last headshots that I had, which were years ago, the Robert who was doing them, he's also a very very well known actor, but he's also a photographer. He was telling me the most important thing we want to capture is your eyes. He goes, because these headshots are not going to be viewed in person anymore. Everything's going to be digital, and you have to understand that. We have to film and take headshots for digital, and that's the nature of it, man. Everything is moving that way. My son, if you could hear him screaming in the back, is online, screaming at his iPad. Like everything is a digital world now. We're like
yeah.
Digimon.
And I know some folks are, actors are like old school, where they're like, hey, I want to get in there and interact with the director and say, hey, like give me some direction. Let me show you that I can kind of adjust to things and stuff like that. So I get that whole frustration. It's not like that anymore, because you're basically like you're handed sides and you're going, okay, read the scene, and you're like, I know nothing. I'm just doing this completely cold. And
Yeah,
if I make a wrong choice, the director's gonna be like, yeah, it's not gonna work. You know what I mean? So it's so
right.
cruel in a way, because it's like it's all about, it could go one way or the other. So, but again, it's the convenience of it. I mean, I mean, for both. I mean, because I imagine you'd rather just tape yourself and send it in versus
Oh, I'm
waiting in
actually
line on the.
I'm old school. I would much rather be in person. So, because a lot of my strengths as a performer is my being able to shift and change and adjust on the fly, as an improver, as a host, as an MC, all these things. So, like, give an example. When I auditioned for the Lithgows for Snow White, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, went in and read. Now, I wasn't a big famous name, and they were casting predominantly famous people. But I went in and read, and they liked me, so they called me back a second time. Then they called me back a third time, and then on the fourth time, I went in and I just walked in the door and said, "You guys have seen me read this 3 times." I said, "I'm going to walk out and I'm going to come back in. I'm going to do the entire audition as Christopher Walken." And I left and I walked back in and I did the whole script as Christopher Walken.
Yeah, nice.
And now I can't do that on a self tape. After that, they apologized and said, "We won't call you in again." I said, "Thank you," and they gave me the part. But like,
Nice.
that's the kind of stuff that I get to
You
do.
know, the apple. You know
Yeah,
who it
I
is.
literally walked in. I was like, "My friends, welcome to the show. It's crazy. It's nuts." Like,
There you go.
Actually, that's pretty good. That's pretty
yeah,
good.
and so and it was funny because they ended up like having me do walk in like most of the shows that I do for them. They just throw it in somewhere. But like, but the thing is, that's always been my strength. Even with Dave, it was auditioning, doing something else in front of him and then flipping it on him and then doing it 3 times and then him throwing something at me and then me taking that idea and running with it and being able to sort of like make something of it, like the creativity of it. That's my strength. On a
Yeah.
self tape, it's hard. You're right. You got one shot. You got to make a good choice. You got to know how to edit well. You got to know how to like
Mhm.
get the right lighting and make sure that something's not
Yeah.
distracting. There's all these other elements to it that have nothing to do necessarily with the acting performance. It has to do with technical work.
It could be technical, but it could also be just jiving with the idea. Like, can you even try this? And I've told Neil this like numerous times. And I think like our cast knows, I know the cast well enough to know that there are people that can jive with that mode of thinking. And then there are those people that don't. And I think Mulcahy is definitely one of those guys that's kind of in the middle. It's like, it's kind of like when we were doing Psychos, I definitely knew anything I threw at you, you'd kind of like be able to like piece together in your head, even if I wasn't saying it correctly or you didn't get it, you'd be like, all right, let me just try it.
Right.
Ayal or Mayor, he goes by Mayor now. Even him, like he's more of like, he liked that improv thing. But then I noticed like Stephanie and Clay, like they're by the page, by like what's on the page, just I want to do that first, and not really down to improv, not really down to go crazy. But I was always saying that to everyone before we started shooting. I was down to like, hey, if this like line of dialogue doesn't make sense and you want to do something. But I learned something there too, which is, dude, you can't just, as a director, I can't just say that to some people. Like you and I, we had a relationship already. We knew each other. I knew you came from that background. But then I realized, oh fuck, like these other people, like they don't know what that means. Like, wait, improvise a line? I'm saying it exactly like as you wrote it, and I don't want to do that. I want to do it this way. And so I always found that very interesting, where especially because it was you four, it was you and Stephanie, Mayer.
So how do you do that? Like, so Jonathan, you kind of want to wing it sometimes. How do you, and you're working with somebody who's like, nah, man, I want to do it straight by the book. How do you kind of, and even with like a director who wants to do more improv or more just, it is the script, how do you kind of get your way? I guess you can see, what I mean?
The cool thing about it, and this is something I learned in Russia, and it was a hard lesson back in college for me to learn, is that it's not about me, man. None of it is about me. Like, I'm going to do what is right in that moment for the work and for the scene. And so like I worked with this guy, David, what was his last name? Oh my gosh. Anyways, with the Lithgows, and he's by the script kind of actor. And he said eventually he'll be comfortable enough with improving. And he told me, he said, if you could just work with me in rehearsals on the script a little bit, and then I'll just kind of meet you in the middle. And I said, great. But for a movie or something like working with Stephanie or working with, well, Mayor was wild. But what it is just being true to the moment with them, listening and responding. And if I say something different, but they're in the moment and they're working well with me, then they're gonna know how to react,
Mhm.
And if that moment is honest, then they're not going to get mad that it's a different word, or they're not going to get mad that it's something, because it's not about them now. We're experiencing something greater, which is what every actor is trying to do. We're trying to do something that's beyond ourselves. That's the work, as Shakespeare says, the play is the thing, right? Or
Mhm.
and or in Russia, they would say, this isn't about you, leave yourself at the door. This is not about you. So that's one of the things. Like, I could do all this stuff, but it's never about me. I'm just trying to bring every element that I can to make the work better and to make the moment honest. when I
That's
auditioned for,
interesting you say that, man. Actually, because Neil and I have been saying that for years. We're like, it's not about us, it's about the movie. It's
right.
not about our ego. It's not about what we want as directors even too. And I don't think a lot of people would even know that or get that idea. I can see actors doing that kind of thing, but Neil and I have always had that sort of like, this is the mantra. It's about the movie, not about us. It's not about actors. It's about all of us, but it's not about any of us kind of thing.
Exactly. That's right on the money, man. We're working together to do something that's so much bigger than all of us. And that's the goal, man. You look at it at the end of it, and you've put everything into it, and you watch it, and it belongs to everyone else at that point, and
Right.
it's for them to talk about. And yeah, it's selfishness in acting will take away from the work and take away from the scene. And then as an audience member, they could see it and they could feel it, and it takes them out of the actual project that they're watching and they're trying to invest in. And that's just not cool. I mean, you know, it's very common, obviously, in our industry to be self-absorbed and to want to make it about yourself. And I think
Right.
that's just something that kills the actual work itself, and it's hard. It's disappointing to see when it happens. But I also think there's a double-edged sword, because I think if I was a little more selfish, maybe my career would be further along, because I just don't push it as much as I should.
Well,
Because
no, you
after I
got a
do,
lot. You got a lot going on. You definitely have like things happening, but I don't think it's. I don't think that that's the reason why. I do think that there is. I think that there is the selfishness out of. I wouldn't say some directors, but like more of like a producer, more of like, we just need this or we just need that. The creativity coming from writers, directors, and actors is one thing. And then when you have to play both fields like Neil and I do, which is like, we're not only that creative people that do write and direct and want to just be in that world and hope to God that well, that never happened. We didn't get the producer. We didn't get that big deal with this studio or that thing.
yeah, it's exactly. You're trying to balance those two things, as you're right. Like, it is a business. It's you got to make money, or else you're just literally the starving actor, or the starving director, or the starving writer, And man, it's a strange dichotomy. It's a strange thing to try to balance. I try to just believe, and maybe I'm completely wrong in this, but I just try to believe that doing great work will make the money, because people will see it and invest in it. And that's the whole thing. I think, if people love what they're seeing, they'll invest in it.
Yeah.
Um, and
No, I
but
do
it,
too. Yeah,
but it,
that's a good way to look at it for sure.
yeah. But certainly, if they never even see it because we didn't market it appropriately or put it out there or do the right social media, like, it's just, oh, it's exhausting for me as an actor. I'm like, I don't want to think about that, and you do. You have to think about it as a producer. It's a
Yeah,
pain.
no, I'm definitely thinking about it. I'm like, I didn't do enough. I don't know how to do enough. I don't know, and I'm out of money. Jesus Christ! Like when
Yeah.
you're even when you're budgeting all these things as the producer, and Neil knows this too. It's just like, wow, that went up, or oh, I didn't even know about that cost. Wait, I have to pay for something like this? It's like,
Yeah.
the studio teachers, there was like the cops that we had for Psychos, all these other things. Like there's always, yeah, like Neil said, there's always going to be a surprise where you're like, oh, I wanted to put that into marketing, or I wanted to put that into the sound design or music. I wanted like really this music. Now again, I feel lucky of like, okay, I had the budget, I had what I needed. Of course, I would have thrown in some other this, that, and the other with music or something like that, but it did its job. It did what I wanted. It was sort of like, this is my vision, this is what I really, and I loved the movie, and I think everybody was great in the movie, and I'm sort of happy with it. And whether it does buku bucks or not, and it's not even close to buku bucks, that's not the point for me. The point is to like show a body of work, and then again move on to the next thing. Keep going. Keep building on this thing.
Mhm. Well, I could say that I had a great time working with you on it, man. That was fun. That was a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I think we
Yeah,
definitely had fun.
it's a fun ride, and I mean, Jonathan, I first met you at the premiere of the movie, as a matter of fact, and I was telling
Yeah.
you then. I mean, I really enjoyed all of the performances. I mean, you're kind of it's your story. I mean, you're kind of it follows your kind of like Dave. I wouldn't even say you're the protagonist, because everybody's sort of nut crazy in this thing. So, but I guess you are. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of your story. You're kind of the glue that holds it all together. You're kind of making the thing go, but you're part of, you know, 4 people that are kind of like, I guess, the main, you know, there's obviously you 4 the main kind of things going on, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. And you know, Dave mentioned that two of you are very different than the others as far as your acting styles, but it all just comes together, and you there's just so much chemistry with the 4 of you, and everybody plays off each other so well. And you mentioned earlier, you know, you got to listen to the other person and kind of whatever happens from that, and you can tell that's going on. You know what I mean? You're getting some honest, genuine reactions because one actor's listening to the other and they're just going with it, and they're like, yep, here, this is how I would respond since you did that way. Boom. It's really cool, really fun to watch.
That's what it all comes down to. It's about, what do they say in Meisner? They say acting is reacting, and the whole point is you just have to listen to each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and everything will come out in that moment of truth. Ryan Mulcahy is so great to work with, man. You had on the previous podcast, you said I just can't talk enough about how much I enjoy that human being. He is ridiculous, and he looks great on camera. he gives good face.
Yeah, and him and me and Dave go way back. I mean, I know you guys know each other, you know, from a few years ago, but I mean, Dave and Ryan and me all moved out to LA together back in 2008, was it?
2008. Yep.
Yeah. So we were the originals, and then Johnny Valone actually took, when I left to go back to Virginia. Johnny Valone took my he became the new me.
The new roommate, yeah,
the new
exactly.
roommate, because he was right across the hall. I mean, that's just, I mean, when you look back at, I mean, it's just crazy that we lucked out with having Johnny as like our across the hall neighbor, kind of, you know, when we moved out there in 2008. And now that everything's happened, you know, Psychos and Socios, I mean, none of this stuff would be possible had we not moved to LA when we did and had these neighbors. And, you know, it's just kind of crazy if you look back on it.
I always say this in life: there are no accidents. I feel like everything just kind of, you know, self-manifestation or destiny, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, we've had that argument, dude. I remember those like a few drinks where I'm going, no, it's all accidents. You're like, there's no you're a fatist. You're a fatist, and I'm not at all.
Well, shit, Dave and me did a movie in 2006 called 11, and the whole point of it was, you know, everything that happens, is it a coincidence or was it meant to be? You know, it was like coin flip.
Yeah,
which one is it?
And I've always played with that theme. I think even with Psychos and Socios, I was playing with that. I play with it in some of the other stuff that I'm writing right now, where it's like I've just loved that thematic of because I think people are obviously very down the middle, like and it's either one or the other. People either think everything happens for a reason, and then there's people that are like, no, it's all just random. So
it's that end of Forrest Gump, you know, what does he say? You know, Forrest says, he goes, maybe it's both.
Well, then I come in and go, well, you can't be a fatist and think it's both, because fate equals literally it's fate, so it needs to happen the way it does. But Jonathan, I know we've had a lot of fun talking about movies, because it's like you're into that too, and Tarantino, martial arts stuff, and
I'm a cinephile, man.
You know, you love comic book kind of stuff, and I'm kind of into that. You know way more than me about that kind of shit, but you know, it was just kind of fun.
Yeah, man. I'm a big nerd. I love the MCU and everything they're doing, always following it. But yeah, man, and my big thing too about film is knowing the classics and knowing where it all came from, so you understand where it's going. I love teaching my kids or teaching my friends, like when they see a movie and I'm like, yeah, that's just a remake of this, or oh yeah, this is like an homage to this, you know, like The Mandalorian. And I was like talking about the spaghetti westerns and you know, Seven Samurai and all the things that The Mandalorian were based on. And it's just really cool to know where everything came from, to see where it's going.
Oh yeah, it's you got to know your history. You got to know.
Yeah.
For sure. I was in this writing group, and one of the guys in the writing group was talking to some, I guess he was, I don't know, in his early 20s or something like that. And the guy in the writing group was talking about Die Hard, how it had like almost a perfect script structure of like, act one, act two, that kind of thing. And the
so
kid
good.
was like, "Oh, that was before 1990. I don't watch movies before 1990." And it was just like, "Oh my God."
What? What?
It's like, like, please just, then you're in the, please go
Oh
away from
my
me right now.
gosh.
I'm just like, so it's so on so many levels. It's just, oh man.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. I have this friend named Chris, and she was working at Forever 21, and these, what's Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones was playing, and I guess Britney Spears covered it, and these girls came up to her and said, who are these guys singing Britney Spears' song?
Oh God. Oh,
And my
geez.
friend Kristen got so pissed, and she was just like, "How dare you?" She
Wow.
got mad, and it's just that kind of crap where I'm like, oh yeah, like that kid, you're not gonna watch anything before 1990. Get out, get out. Like,
It's, yeah, it's,
Yeah,
you
or
just
you
not,
yourself just get out, which you did.
yeah,
You were like, all right, I
yeah,
gotta leave. I'm
yeah.
done
So
with you
I,
guys.
I think he just was like, I can't even talk to you. I mean, and sometimes, sometimes these oldies are hard to stomach and they're just boring or what, but you just have to see where it was, where it came from, what it's become, all the trends and changes in between.
Yeah,
And
well, it's like any of those rules. Like there's the writing rules. Like know the rules before you break them. Know how
hmm
acting
right.
went before, and then break that thing. Do this before, but know what happened prior. Which I think is like whether it's acting or directing or writing, it's all that. It's just at least know what happened prior so you can break it. But you know why you're breaking it. You know why you're breaking that rule.
Right, you have to be a master of it in order to actually play with it like that, which is why every actor, we talk about what Meisner, Strasberg, and Adler, which is all based off Stanislavski's work at the Moscow Art Theater in 1898, like you have
Yeah.
to know the basis of it all, or else, yeah, man,
Then
you're
it's
not,
just
you're not
yeah
really doing the
then it's
work.
just chaos if you don't, because then there's no like I knew exactly what I was doing when I was like, all right, the opening scene's gonna happen and then the second scene everyone's gonna talk to camera and we're breaking the fourth wall completely. I don't care, but I know why I'm doing it because I don't want to like have a movie that's just set up in a independent world where we have to go, wait, why are they doing this, what's happening here. I was like, no, just have them all tell the audience what's happening. That's it. That's all I want. So
Yeah.
why not do it?
And thanks for
So
that little moment, like right when we jump into it with the cooler font. That was a great moment. That was fun.
that was cool. That was actually the note you gave me, which I was like, all right, nice. That's very cool.
That was fun.
that was a fun, scene. Yeah, the way it turned out and everything. That was very cool. Very cool. So so Jonathan, when you're kind of, Dave's giving you direction to kind of go, okay, just don't be afraid to do this. You're calm 1 minute, you're funny the next, you're crazy all of this stuff. Do you have kind of a consistent, like, okay, this is kind of my through line through, like, I'm not going to be this manic guy who's all over the place. I'm going to have kind of a base or a consistency throughout, or you just kind of, I'm just going to wing it from day to day and just, like, how
Well,
did that kind of work? Because it's such an unpredictable character.
Yeah, so I think winging it is part of it, but the whole point is the intention and what I'm striving for and the goal. Because if I'm just winging it and just being some weird crazy person, then why am I even here? Like the point that I'm in this scene, that I'm talking to these people, that I've got them here, that the choices that I'm making, that is all this one intention, this one goal that I have. So my manic nature as a character and my psychosis is allowed to exist with this intention, and that's where it all comes in. So it's funny enough, it's fate and chaos. Like
Yeah.
I do have a through line, but I'm allowed to be chaotic through that. But the chaos will come from the moment. The chaos will come from someone saying something, doing something, me hearing something, and just immediately responding to it and allowing myself the freedom to respond, because this character doesn't have those sort of stigmas and controls. So I'm allowed to freely respond how I want with keeping my intention.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because again, you know, you had the most constraints on you because you
hmm
kind of knew what was going to happen. You kind of knew everything. That was the biggest bitch of writing this thing, was like, how do I make a protagonist cool when he knows what's going to happen? And
Right.
that was like that thing of like, well, maybe. And I don't think it was the fact that, we knew it. It was the fact that he's willing to go through it, and everything that's going to happen, he's fine with. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And the fun part is that there is that calmness to the character because I do, as someone who's clairvoyant can see what's going to happen. But my actual response to all those things as the character is allowed. I'm allowed to be impatient. I'm allowed to have these experiences because I'm still a
Right. Yeah.
human, and I'm still upset, or I'm still angry, or I'm still feeling this, or I'm still feeling, and I'm allowed to. And that was something that was really cool, like knowing the future but still responding in earnest to what is taking place.
Jonathan, do you want to say anything? What else you got going on? Is there anything you want to plug or anything?
Well, right now things are so slow with the quarantine. Right now, I'm raising 3 kids out in Oregon. I'm looking to work with the theaters out here a little bit, and then see what sort of projects I'll do back in California soon. But it's kind of a slow time with quarantine. No rush
Of
on
course,
anything.
yeah.
Just raise my children, be a dad.
Yeah. So, hey, man, it was
Yeah.
great talking to you. And, all this insight about acting and how you work, your process, your backstories. Your backstory is always going to fascinate me. I'm sure we'll see each other at some point, and you're going to say, yeah, I did that thing, back in 2002. And I'll be like, what? You did
Yeah,
what? Yeah.
I'm Johnny. I feel like Johnny Drama. It's bizarre.
Yeah. But hey, man, thanks so much for being part of the 611 Films podcast, being the second guest. Appreciate you.
Hey, it was an absolute pleasure, guys. Love you both. Thank you so much. Be
Hey,
safe
thanks,
out in
man.
LA. Be safe out there.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Being safe.
I know.
Yeah,
Insane,
guy.
man. We'll see you
All
soon,
right.
man.
Thanks
All
so
right,
much.
take care, guys.
Bye.
All right. Take care.
All right.